In 1970, a birthday gift would transform 3 young lives into a living nightmare. What began as an innocent Raggedy Ann doll became the focus of one of America's most documented demonic cases of terror, so profound that even experienced paranormal investigators struggled to contain it. This is the true story of Annabelle, where good intentions opened doors that should have remained forever closed, when innocence became evil. 25-year-old Deirdre Barnard had just moved into her first apartment in Connecticut, sharing the space with her friends Laura Clifton and Laura's fiancé Carl Randall. As a nursing student, Deirdre was focused on building a career dedicated to helping others, when her mother presented her with a Raggedy Ann doll for her birthday. It seemed like the perfect companion, cheerful, nostalgic, and comforting. The doll was unremarkable, rosy red cheeks, matching red yarn hair, and the innocent smile characteristic of children's toys from that era. Deirdre loved it immediately, placing it carefully on her bed each morning before leaving for classes. Arms and legs stretched out in the same position every time. This routine became important because it established a pattern that would soon be violated in impossible ways. After several days, Deirdre noticed something unsettling. She would return home to find the doll's position changed, legs crossed when they'd been straight, arms folded when they'd been extended. At first, she dismissed it as memory error or natural settling, but the movements escalated. The doll began appearing in different parts of her room, then in other areas of the apartment entirely. Her roommates witnessed it too, eliminating the possibility of individual mistake or imagination. The turning point came one evening when all 3 returned home together. Opening the apartment door, they were confronted with a scene that defied explanation. The doll was kneeling in a chair facing the entrance, as if it had been waiting for them. Deirdre knew with absolute certainty she'd left it on her bed that morning. When they attempted to recreate the kneeling position, they discovered it was physically impossible. The doll's construction and weight distribution wouldn't allow it to maintain that posture without external support. Something was manipulating the doll. The rational world they'd trusted was crumbling, replaced by something that operated outside natural laws. But the manifestations were only beginning. The messages and the blood. Within days, mysterious notes started appearing throughout the apartment, written in pencil on parchment paper. The messages were brief but chilling. Help us and help Carl. The intimate knowledge of their names was disturbing enough, but more troubling was the realization that none of them owned parchment paper or pencils. The materials were appearing from nowhere, suggesting the entity wasn't just moving objects, but introducing new matter into their physical space. Suspecting an intruder playing elaborate pranks, Deirdre and Laura implemented security measures. They left subtle marks around windows and doors, rearranged furniture to create patterns that would reveal unauthorized entry. When they returned home that evening, nothing had been disturbed, yet the doll had moved again. Their precautions had succeeded only in eliminating rational explanations, forcing them to confront an impossible conclusion. Then they discovered the doll covered in what appeared to be blood. Real blood coated its hands, with 3 distinct dots on its chest. This physical evidence crossed a threshold that movements and notes hadn't. Whatever they were dealing with was escalating from unsettling to dangerous. The 3 sat together in their living room, terrified and desperately searching for solutions. Deirdre grabbed a phone book and found a listing for a psychic medium. During the call, they mentioned experiencing ghostly activity, but didn't specify the doll. The medium arrived the next day, walked through the apartment, and immediately sensed a strong presence around the doll. She proposed conducting a séance to gather more information, and the frightened inhabitants agreed a decision that would prove catastrophic. The deception that changed everything. During the séance, the medium began channeling what she claimed was the spirit of a 7-year-old girl named Annabelle Higgins. The story emerged in heartbreaking detail. A child who once played in fields where the apartments now stood, confused about her own death, wandering lonely halls with no one to play with. When Deirdre brought home the doll, little Annabelle finally had a companion. Through the medium, the child's spirit asked permission to inhabit the doll and stay with them. The narrative was perfectly crafted to exploit the maternal instincts of nursing. Students, compassionate young women dedicated to caring for others. Touched by the lonely child's story, Deirdre and Laura agreed. They named the doll Annabelle and welcomed the entity into their lives, believing they were performing an act of kindness for a suffering child spirit. They had just made a terrible mistake. What they'd invited in was no child. Carl remained skeptical throughout, sensing something fundamentally wrong about the entire situation. His instincts would prove tragically accurate. Following the séance, the inhabitants began treating the doll as a living person, speaking to it as they would to young Annabelle. This attention fed whatever had attached itself to the object, strengthening its presence and expanding its power. Carl began experiencing unexplained illness, feeling unwell at random times, with no medical cause. His nights filled with horrible nightmares that left him exhausted and anxious. Then came the night that removed all doubt about the entity's true nature. Carl woke to find the doll gliding over his body. Its hands positioned themselves on either side of his neck, and he felt crushing pressure as it strangled him. He pushed against it with all his strength, but the soft cloth doll wouldn't budge, as immovable as if he were pushing against a wall. His testimony later described the sensation as the doll making an electrical connection with both sides of his neck. Only when he summoned every reserve of energy did he finally throw it away, gasping and traumatized, but alive. The violence escalated. The entity had dropped its disguise. One evening when Deirdre was out, Laura and Carl heard loud banging from Deirdre's room. Carl rushed to investigate, throwing open the door, expecting an intruder. Instead, they found only Annabelle lying on the floor, staring at them with void-like eyes, as if waiting for their arrival. As Carl approached to pick up the doll, he suddenly screamed and dropped it. White-hot pain lashed across his chest, blood soaking through his shirt. Neither he nor Laura had seen anything attack him. No weapon, no assailant, nothing visible that could explain the wounds. When Laura pulled up his blood-soaked shirt, they discovered several deep gashes resembling claw marks, inflicted with apparent intent to kill. The invisible threat was more terrifying than any physical attacker. They fled the room, praying the force wouldn't follow. When Deirdre returned and heard what happened, all three recognized they were in mortal danger. They contacted a local priest, who immediately recognized the severity and passed the information up ecclesiastical channels until it reached Ed and Lorraine Warren, paranormal investigators who would become synonymous with America's most famous hauntings, the Warrens and the truth. The Warrens arrived, interviewed each person, examined the apartment and the doll, and delivered a grim assessment. This was heavy demonic infestation. The demon haunted not just the apartment, but the building and surrounding land, using the doll as its primary vessel for physical interaction. The séance had opened communication channels, allowing the demon to speak directly with spiritually vulnerable participants. The story of lonely little Annabelle was pure manipulation, a false narrative designed to evoke maximum sympathy from two nursing students who would naturally want to help a suffering child. Once they'd accepted the entity and granted permission for it to stay, everyone connected to them became fair game. The demon no longer needed its disguise and was free to reveal its true violent nature. The Warrens estimated that left unchecked, the entity would have killed one or all of them within weeks. They contacted Father Everett, who performed a blessing to weaken or drive out the demon. Afterward, the Warrens warned that, if not completely expelled, the entity was currently weakened, but could return with vengeance. Believing the doll was the primary conduit, Deirdre requested the Warrens take it with them. They agreed, and for the three inhabitants, the nightmare seemed to be ending. But for the Warrens, taking custody of Annabelle meant their problems were just beginning. The Museum of Horrors, as Ed and Lorraine drove home with Annabelle in Ed's briefcase. Their vehicle began experiencing catastrophic mechanical failures. Power steering failed. Brakes stopped responding. The engine stalled, repeatedly malfunctions that nearly caused multiple head-on collisions. The demon was attacking through their car, attempting to cause a fatal accident. When they finally reached home, they placed the doll in Ed's office. But the manifestations continued. Annabelle levitated repeatedly, teleported between rooms, and the familiar parchment notes reappeared. Help me and help us. One evening, Lorraine heard loud, rolling growls reverberating through the walls and throughout their entire house, as if the entity was demonstrating its power even without direct contact with the doll. Father Daniel Mills made a critical error during his visit. He picked up Annabelle and mockingly told her, "You're nothing but a rag doll, and you can't hurt anything." Ed immediately warned him never to touch or speak to the doll that way again. As Father Mills prepared to leave, Lorraine, whose clairvoyant abilities had proven accurate many times, warned him to drive carefully because she'd received a premonition of tragedy involving a young priest. Hours later, Father Mills was involved in a near-fatal car accident that totaled his vehicle. His brakes had mysteriously failed. The timing was too precise to dismiss the demon had followed through on its threat against someone who'd dared to mock it. The Warrens made a decisive choice. Annabelle would be locked away permanently. They couldn't destroy the doll. Their experience suggested destroying a conduit often freed the entity to find a new vessel. They doused Annabelle in holy water, placed her inside a blessed glass case with a crucifix on the outside, and added a warning sign explicitly telling visitors not to touch it. The doll was placed in their occult museum, joining other dangerous objects accumulated over years of investigation. The danger continues. Even contained behind blessed glass, Annabelle's influence persisted. After Ed's death, Lorraine identified Annabelle as one of the most evil objects she'd encountered in decades of paranormal worker chilling assessment. From someone who'd confronted numerous malevolent entities, visitors to the museum reported various afflictions after viewing Annabelle. Some experienced severe bad luck that seemed beyond coincidence. Others encountered death under suspicious circumstances. Still others suffered complete psychological breaks, ending up institutionalized for life. The pattern suggested that even viewing the doll through protective glass could create a connection the entity exploited. The most dramatic example involved a young man who visited with his girlfriend and approached Annabelle's case to verbally challenge the entity, demanding the worst it had to offer. After leaving on his motorcycle 3 hours into their journey home, he lost control at high speed and struck a tree. He died almost instantly. His girlfriend survived, but remained hospitalized for over a year. Was this random accident, or did the entity deliver exactly what was demanded? The legacy today, 5 decades after being sealed away, Annabelle remains on display at the Warrens Occult Museum in Connecticut. Now managed by Loren's daughter Judy Spiro and her husband Tony, visitors can view the innocent-looking Raggedy Ann doll behind protective barriers. Stark contrast between cheerful appearance and violent history that creates profound cognitive dissonance. The museum maintains strict protocols. No one may touch the case. Visitors must maintain respectful distance, and challenges to the entity are forbidden. These aren't superstitious precautions, but practical safety measures based on documented incidents of people suffering after disrespecting the containment. The Annabelle case raises profound questions about the relationship between attention, belief, and supernatural phenomena. The escalation followed a clear trajectory, subtle movements until the séance, then violent attacks after the entity was welcomed and given attention. This pattern suggests belief and attention might actually empower spiritual entities, giving them energy to manifest more powerfully in the physical world. The deception employed reveals frightening sophistication, rather than appearing as something obviously malevolent. The entity presented itself as perfectly designed to evoke sympathy from its specific audience. It understood human psychology and exploited compassionate instincts brilliantly. The role of invitation cannot be overstated. Traditional teachings emphasize that powerful malevolent entities require permission to fully enter someone's life. The séance provided formal invitation, acceptance granted permission, and subsequent attention provided energy. Whether one believes in literal demonic possession, psychological phenomena, or cultural constructs, the Annabelle case documents how belief shapes experience and how fear, once established, persists across generations. For Deirdre, Laura, and Carl, the experience was undeniably real and traumatic, their lives disrupted by something requiring outside expertise to resolve. The physical evidence of wounds, accidents, and witnessed phenomena created shared reality among multiple people that demanded explanation. Annabelle sits in her case, unchanged over decades, while visitors come and go. The doll's expression remains fixed, dark eyes maintaining their void-like gaze, rosy cheeks suggesting eternal innocence. Behind that innocent facade, according to those who documented the case, waits something far darker, patient, aware, separated from potential victims only by blessed glass and sacred warnings that some tragically choose to ignore. The warning remains as relevant today as in 1970. If you stare too long into the abyss stares back. And in Annabelle's case, what stares back might follow you home.